You're listening to Chesterton Radio, broadcasting from the little station on Commercial Street in Atchison, Kansas. Stories, ideas, wonder. And now, from the common room.
I want you to picture something for a second, and really try to put yourself completely in this scene.
Oh yeah, set the stage for us.
Right, so feel the chill in the air, smell the damp pine needles.
Mm-hmm.
It is October of 1912.
A very specific moment in time.
Exactly. And you are deep in this dark, ancient, just heavily forested hunting estate in Poland. It's called Spała.
Right.
And the absolute ruler of the Russian Empire, Tsar Nicholas II, and his wife, Empress Alexandra, they are hosting this glittering, opulent dinner party.
Like the absolute peak of high society.
Yeah, the room is packed. You've got Polish magnates, foreign diplomats, high-ranking aristocrats.
Yeah.
Heavy crystal glasses are clinking everywhere.
Very fancy.
Oh, totally.
Yep.
Footmen in immaculate gold-braided livery are just gliding silently through the room, serving imported wines. Over in the corner, there's a string quartet playing a lively polonaise. It is the absolute pinnacle of Edwardian luxury.
Sounds perfect. But there's a catch, Ray.
A huge catch. Because if you were to walk out of that dining room, slip past the armed guards, and just walk down the hall behind a set of heavy wooden doors, you would hear a sound that would literally freeze the blood in your veins.
It's just horrifying to even think about.
It really is. Their 8-year-old son, the heir to 1/6 of the Earth's surface, is screaming in absolute unspeakable agony. He is, quite literally bleeding to death from the inside out.
Right.
And his parents, sitting at the head of that dining table, they are forcing themselves to smile, to eat, and to make small talk, as if absolutely nothing is wrong.
It is a scene of psychological horror that honestly almost defies human comprehension. We often talk about historical tipping points in terms of, massive battles or grand treaties.
Yes.
But this is a tipping point happening in a child's bedroom. And it's completely hidden behind a facade of total denial.
Which brings us to the unique mission of today's deep dive in the common room. We are looking at this incredible stack of sources to answer one massive, sweeping question.
And we have some fascinating material to work with today.
We really do. Our primary lens for this is actually an old BBC Saturday Night Theater radio drama. Specifically, it's Royce Ryton's 1970 play, Holiday in Spała.
But just to be clear, we aren't here to do like a theater review.
No, definitely not. We are using the brilliant dramatization of this play to basically pry open the extraordinary, terrifying, true history that's hidden right underneath it.
Exactly. And to do that, we are cross-refereing the script with actual modern genetic analysis of the Russian royal family.
Which is wild science, by the way.
It really is. Plus, we are bringing in the chilling first-hand eyewitness accounts of the people who were actually trapped in that hunting lodge while all this was happening.
The people who are actually in the room.
Right. We have the memoirs of the secret police chief, Alexander Tsarevich. We've got the diaries of the royal tutor, Pierre Gilliard, and the personal accounts of the Empress's closest confidante, Anna Virubova.
So bringing all these threads together, the question we are trying to answer today is this. How could the illness of one little boy in a Polish forest help change the history of an entire empire?
The layer of just tragic irony hanging over this entire narrative is almost suffocating when you really look at the timeline.
Because of what's coming, right?
Yeah, exactly. The Romanov family has retreated to this Polish estate for what they desperately keep calling a quiet family holiday.
Quotes around holiday, for sure.
Right. And they have absolutely no idea that the outbreak of World War I is less than 2 years away.
Wow.
Nicholas has zero idea that he will be forced to abdicate his throne in just 5 years. They are hurtling completely blindly toward the total annihilation of their dynasty.
And yet, in October 1912, what are they doing?
Their entire universe is hyper-focused on pretending that everything is perfectly normally fine.
But you can only treat a fragile situation like that as normal for so long before reality just completely shatters the illusion.
Oh, absolutely.
They are living in this eerie tranquility, acting like a typical wealthy family on vacation, while there is an actual biological catastrophe unfolding inside the Tsar's son. So let's look at the atmosphere Ryton's play sets up right at the beginning.
It's a very tense setup.
Yeah, we are dropped immediately into this high-pressure cooker. The Romanovs arrive at the Spała hunting lodge, and from what I understand, this wasn't exactly a cheerful, bright summer home, right?
Far from it, actually. Anna Virubova, the Empress's confidant, she describes Spa as one of the dampest, gloomiest palaces she had ever set foot in.
Really? Just a dark vibe.
Oh, completely. It was this massive, dark wooden villa, and it was completely engulfed by the vast Polish forests. It had a very non-Russian, almost oppressive feel to it.
So not what you picture when you think of a royal retreat.
No, not at all. The tree canopy was so thick and the architecture was so heavy that Virubova actually noted they had to keep the electric lights on all day just to see in the ground floor rooms.
Oh, wow. That's deeply unsettling.
It was a deeply strange, claustrophobic place to choose for what was supposed to be a restorative holiday.
And in the play, that physical gloominess, it perfectly mirrors the intense political and family pressure that's just suffocating them. I mean, Nicholas isn't just trying to relax, right?
No, he's basically working around the clock.
Yeah, he's actively trying to push his 17-year-old daughter, Grand Duchess Olga, into a politically advantageous marriage with Prince Carol of Romania. And this is causing massive friction.
Right, because nobody really wants this marriage except maybe Nicholas for political reasons.
Exactly. Olga wants no part of it.
Yeah.
Her mother, Alexandra, wants no part of it. It's a mess.
And that political matchmaking, it's actually a brilliant window into the burdens Nicholas carried. I mean, consider what it really meant to be the Tsar in 1912.
He wasn't just a figurehead.
Exactly. He wasn't a constitutional monarch like his cousin King George V over in England who, had a parliament to make the hard decisions. Nicholas was the absolute autocrat.
The buck stopped entirely with him.
Yes. And the play captures this isolation beautifully. There's a moment when Nicholas tells Olga that no one else on Earth can possibly understand his problems.
Because no one else has his job.
Right. He complains that he is ruling this enormous backward country, constantly trying to force it into the modern age, while simultaneously holding off a revolution.
So marrying his daughter off is just strategy.
Exactly. Securing a Franco-Russian orbit in the Balkans by marrying his daughter into the Romanian royal family, it wasn't just a fatherly suggestion, it was a desperate geopolitical maneuver.
That dynamic is so striking to read, because you have a man trying to be a compassionate, modern father. Right. I mean, he actually promises Olga he won't force her into the marriage if she truly despises the idea.
Which is incredibly progressive for a monarch of that era.
It really was. But at the exact same time, he's maneuvering her like a chess piece across the map of Europe.
Yeah.
Feels like he's constantly being torn in half by the crown and his family.
And then, of course, you add Alexandra to the mix, and the tension just explodes.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about Alexandra.
Alexandra's psychology is really the engine driving so much of this tragedy. You have to remember, she was raised in the incredibly strict, highly respectable Victorian court of her grandmother, Queen Victoria.
So she has very specific ideas about how royals should act.
Precisely. Because of that upbringing, she views the outside world, and particularly foreign courts like Romania's, with deep suspicion and, honestly, moral disgust.
She thinks they're all just corrupt.
Yeah, she perceives them as frivolous and corrupt. So she is desperately trying to hold her family together in this tight, isolated little bubble. She literally refers to her children as her chickens.
Her chickens, wow. That is so telling. Reading the descriptions of their daily itinerary, it's hard to even call this a vacation.
It sounds like work.
It totally does. If you've ever been on a work retreat where you are supposed to be relaxing, but you know the boss is watching your every single move, multiply that anxiety by 1,000,000.
Right, because the stakes are global.
Yeah. You have the Polish magnates arriving with their own agendas. You have the Romanian royals bringing massive suites of ladies-in-waiting and equerries. You have these daily stag hunts that are essentially high-stakes diplomatic networking events with guns.
It sounds absolutely exhausting.
Exhausting is the perfect word for it.
But the thing is, the exhaustion was very real. But all of this, the Romanian marriage plots, the Polish dignitaries, the hunting parties, it was all merely a distraction.
A smokescreen.
Exactly. It was a fragile, exhausting facade designed to hide the real, unspoken ruler of the Romanov household. And that ruler wasn't the Tsar, and it wasn't the Empress.
It was the boy's genetics.
Yes. Genetics dictated everything.
So let's transition into the hard science here, because to really get this, we have to understand the biological mechanism that was holding this massive empire hostage.
It's fascinating from a medical history standpoint.
It really is. For decades, historians just referred to this as the royal disease. They broadly assumed it was just standard hemophilia. But the sources we are looking at include modern, cutting-edge DNA analysis of the Romanov bones that were discovered in Yekaterinburg.
Right, which finally gave us the real answer.
Exactly. That DNA sequencing finally confirmed the exact mutation they were dealing with. It was hemophilia B.
And the DNA extraction and sequencing done on those century-old degraded bones, it was a monumental scientific achievement on its own.
Oh, for sure. Just incredible science.
They managed to isolate a very specific, rare mutation on the F9 gene. And to truly grasp the nightmare this family was living, we need to understand how clotting actually works in a healthy human body.
Right. Give us the breakdown. How does it work?
So when you get a cut or suffer a deep bruise, your blood vessels constrict and platelets rush to the site to form a temporary plug.
Like a cork.
Exactly like a cork. But to make that plug hold, your blood relies on a complex chain reaction called the coagulation cascade. Various proteins interact to eventually create fibrin, which acts like a biological net. It traps red blood cells and seals the wound permanently.
Okay, so hemophilia B means the blood is missing a crucial link in that chain reaction.
Precisely. Specifically, it lacks factor IX. Without factor IX, the coagulation cascade completely breaks down. That fibrin net never forms. The blood simply cannot clot properly.
I think a lot of people hear bleeding disease and they just imagine a child getting a paper cut and maybe needing a lot of Band-Aids.
Yeah, that's a common misconception.
But reading the medical realities of hemophilia B, the terrifying part isn't a scraped knee. It's the internal bleeding.
The internal bleeding is the real killer here.
Right. If I can try to visualize this for you listening, it's like trying to stop a leak in a dam from the inside. If a child with this condition bumps his knee or trips, the blood vessels break under the skin, like they do for anyone.
But the difference is...
Right, because the blood can't clot. The pressure just keeps building. The blood has nowhere to go but into the joints and the muscle tissue itself.
That is a very accurate way to picture it. The blood flows slowly but relentlessly, just pooling internally. When it bleeds into a joint, which is a condition called hemarthrosis, the blood fills the synovial space.
Which has to be incredibly painful.
Oh, beyond painful. The pressure swells the joint to grotesque proportions. And blood is highly irritating to synovial tissue. So as it sits there, it literally begins to degrade the cartilage and attack the bone.
Good Lord.
The pain is consistently described by medical professionals as excruciating. It's comparable to having your joints slowly crushed in an industrial vise.
Wow. If you've ever watched a child suffer through even a minor injury in the ER, you know that sheer panic as a parent. Now imagine that panic, but knowing that a simple stumble on the stairs could be a drawn-out, agonizing death sentence.
It's unbearable.
And worse, you can't tell anyone it's happening. Why the absolute secrecy? I mean, why couldn't the Tsar of Russia just hire the best doctors in the world and publicly announce his son had a medical condition?
Well, it comes down to the philosophical foundation of the Russian autocracy itself. The core doctrine of the state was orthodoxy, autocracy, and nationality.
So religion and state were completely linked.
Completely entwined.
Yeah.
The Tsar's authority was not granted by the people. It was derived directly from God. He was the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. Therefore, his heir, the future Tsar, had to be perceived as physically and spiritually flawless.
So a genetic defect ruins that image.
Exactly. If the vast Russian peasantry, who, were deeply religious and highly superstitious, if they found out that the heir was crippled by a bleeding disease, they wouldn't view it as a random genetic mutation.
They would see it as a curse.
Without a doubt.
A literal sign that God had abandoned the Romanov dynasty.
Unquestionably. It would invalidate their divine right to rule entirely. It would invite immediate challenges to the succession, panic in the financial markets, and it would hand the revolutionary factions the absolute ultimate propaganda tool.
So they were trapped.
The Romanovs were prisoners of their own absolute power. They had to maintain this illusion of divine perfection, even as it was actively tearing their family apart.
And the psychological toll that secrecy took on Alexandra is just staggering, especially when you factor in how the disease is actually transmitted.
The genetics of it play a huge role in her mental state.
Yeah, because hemophilia is an X-linked recessive disorder. Women have two X chromosomes, so if one has the mutation, the other healthy X chromosome usually compensates.
Right, so they are carriers, but they rarely show severe symptoms themselves.
Exactly. But men only have one X chromosome. If they inherit the mutated one, they suffer the full brunt of the disease. Alexandra inherited this mutation through the maternal line, tracing straight back to her grandmother, Queen Victoria.
Which means Alexandra knows with absolute certainty that she is the one who introduced this curse into the Romanov bloodline.
That guilt has to be crushing.
It was. And the BBC play captures this guilt with just devastating precision. There are scenes where Alexandra becomes hyper-defensive, lashing out at the doctors.
Because they can't fix what she feels she broke.
Exactly. She hates them because their medical science is useless against this flaw in her bloodline.
Wait, if it's carried on the X chromosome and Alexandra is a carrier, doesn't that mean her daughters are at risk too?
Yes, exactly. It means there is a 50% chance that any of her 4 healthy, beautiful daughters, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, are also carriers of the mutated F9 gene.
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought about that.
And this brings us right back to the political marriage plot in the play that we were talking about earlier.
The Romanian prince.
Yes. If Nicholas forces Olga to marry Prince Carol of Romania, she might bring the hemophilia curse right into the Romanian royal family, destabilizing another European dynasty.
That is wild.
The play features a fantastic scene where the Dowager Empress, Nicholas's mother, explicitly warns him about this. She states they are risking spreading this dire disease all over Europe.
But, you can only build a wall of denial so high before reality finally breaches it. I mean, they assigned this massive, burly sailor named Derivenko to shadow Alexei everywhere he went, to literally carry him or catch him before he fell.
Right, trying to control a child's every move.
But you're dealing with a boisterous 8-year-old boy. The fragile illusion of health they had constructed was about to be completely shattered. And the catalyst wasn't an assassin's bullet. It was an ordinary bathtub and a bumpy road.
So true. Let us turn to the primary source accounts of the secret police chief, Alexander Spiridovich, to reconstruct exactly what happened here.
Walk us through the timeline.
The nightmare didn't actually begin at the Spała hunting lodge. It started a few weeks earlier in September at a different imperial hunting preserve called Bailaveje. Alexei was preparing to take a bath. He was full of energy, and like many young boys of his era, he idolized the Navy. He was constantly dressed in sailor suits.
Typical kid stuff?
Right. He decided he wanted to mimic the sailors he admired on the royal yacht. So he climbed up onto the edge of this large, sunken porcelain bathtub, and he just jumped in.
A completely innocent, playful thing for a kid to do. But he slipped.
He slipped and bumped his side on the sharp edge of the porcelain tub. And Spiridovich's memoirs note something really insidious about the injury.
What was it?
Alexei didn't even cry out at first. The pain wasn't immediate. The skin wasn't broken.
So they thought he was fine.
Exactly. But deep inside the tissue, a blood vessel had ruptured. A slow, silent, internal bleed had begun. A few minutes later, the pressure dropped and he lost consciousness.
God. For a healthy boy, it would have been a nasty bruise that fades in a week. For Alexei, it was a biological catastrophe ticking away inside his body. But they managed it, right?
Initially, yes.
They moved the family from Bielowiej to Spała shortly after, and he actually seemed to be recovering. But then, Alexandra made a decision that would just haunt her for the rest of her life. She wanted to give him some fresh air, a taste of normalcy. She took him for a ride in a horse-drawn carriage.
We have to remember the geography of Spała here. This is a remote, ancient hunting lodge. There are no paved, smooth roads.
It's all dirt tracks.
Right. The paths through the forest are sandy, rough, deeply rutted tracks. As they were driving, the carriage hit a harsh bump. The violent, sudden jolt of the heavy carriage was enough to tear open the newly healing blood vessels.
Oh, no.
The bleeding restarted catastrophically, but this time the blood pooled deep in his groin, in the iliopsoas muscle.
The accounts from Anna Virabova paint a visceral, honestly nauseating picture of this carriage ride back to the villa.
She was right there in the carriage with them.
She was sitting right there, and she describes it as pure torture. Every single movement of the carriage wheels, every rough patch of dirt caused Alexei exquisite agony. By the time they reached the palace doors, the boy was nearly unconscious from the sheer pain.
It was escalating so quickly.
The internal bleeding caused a hematoma, a massive swelling of trapped blood in his groin that grew to the size of a cricket ball.
The physiology of a groin hematoma in a hemophiliac is particularly brutal. Because the bleeding is occurring deep in the muscle tissue surrounding the hip joint, the body's involuntary response is to severely contract the muscles to try and protect the area.
So his leg was just pulled up.
Yes. For 11 excruciating days, Alexei was huddled on his side, his left leg drawn up sharply to his chest. He refused to let anyone touch him or even approach the bed.
Just awful.
He was losing so much blood internally that his face became utterly bloodless. They described it as white as wax, seamed with suffering. His screams echoed constantly through the dark wooden corridors of that damp Polish palace.
Imagine being the mother in that room. The absolute crushing helplessness. Grubova notes that for almost 2 weeks, Empress Alexandra never undressed.
She didn't leave his side.
She never went to bed. She barely rested for a single hour. She just sat by the bed, holding his hand, smoothing his hair, trying to comfort a child who was in so much pain his eyes were literally rolling back in his head.
It pushes the human mind to its absolute breaking point. And the tragedy is compounded by the fact that Alexei himself, despite being only 8 years old, possessed this grim understanding of his own mortality.
He knew what was happening.
He had lived with this pain his entire brief life. He knew the doctors couldn't stop it. He knew he was dying.
There is a quote from Alexei, recorded by both Spiridovich and Grubova independently, that just completely shatters you.
It's heartbreaking.
During one of his rare moments of lucidity, the little boy looked up at his mother and whispered, "When I am dead, build me a little monument of stones in the wood."
It is the ultimate resignation, an 8-year-old making his peace with the end. And yet, as the boy is literally preparing for his own death, the adults surrounding him are forced by the terrifying demands of the autocracy to engage in this macabre, surreal performance of normalcy.
Which brings us to the eyewitness diaries of Pierre Gilliard. Now, Gilliard was the royal tutor. He was a Swiss academic, a very rational, grounded man.
A very reliable source.
Definitely. And his memoirs from Spała read like a gothic psychological thriller. He described standing in the dark corridor, clearly hearing the agonizing moaning of his young pupil from behind the bedroom door.
Right.
And then he walks just a few steps down the hall into the dining room. And what does he see? Footmen in liveries serving drinks on silver salvers, Polish magnates laughing and exchanging diplomatic jokes.
There's unbelievable dissonance.
And the Tsarina, the mother who hasn't slept in a week and whose son just asked for a grave monument, she is forcing a pleasant, rigid smile for her guests.
Ryton's play, Holiday in Spała, captures this surreal horror perfectly by dramatizing the activities of the other children.
Oh, the play rehearsal, right.
Yes. To maintain the illusion that this is just a joyful family holiday, the young Grand Duchesses are ordered to rehearse a comedic French play, Molière's Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme, to entertain the dignitaries.
That is just sad. I can't even...
Think of the emotional toll. You have teenage girls practicing comedic punchlines in the drawing room, while their beloved little brother is screaming in his death throes on the floor right above them.
I have to stop and ask,
Yeah?
at what point does duty cross the line into actual madness?
It's a fair question.
They are literally hosting a cocktail party outside a dying child's room. How do human beings compartmentalize trauma on that scale?
They didn't feel they had a choice. Acknowledging the truth meant acknowledging the end of their entire world.
Because of the political fallout.
Exactly. As we discussed, admitting the sole male heir was dying of a genetic defect carried by the German-born empress would have catastrophic consequences. The Romanovs were terrified of their own people. They believed that maintaining the illusion of divine strength was the literal only thing keeping the empire from tearing itself apart. So they wore the masks.
Meanwhile, behind the closed doors, the best medical minds in the world are failing them completely. They have Dr. Botkin, their loyal family physician. They have summoned Professor Fedorov and Dr. Ralphus, who are like the most elite surgeons in St. Petersburg.
The absolute top of the field.
In the play, Nicholas complains bitterly to Alexandra that these men are supposed to be geniuses, yet they can't cure a simple swelling. In reality, Dr. Fedorov had to deliver a horrifying truth to them.
What did he tell them?
He told the parents that opening the swelling surgically to relieve the pressure would be fatal. Alexei would simply bleed out on the table instantly. They had no blood transfusions back then. They had no synthetic factor IX. Modern medicine had absolutely nothing left to offer.
And that is the pivotal historical moment. When the smartest doctors in your empire tell you that science has failed, that surgery is a death sentence, and that your child will not survive, where do you turn?
You look for a miracle.
You turn to the irrational. You turn to the supernatural. Father Alexander, the royal priest, had already set up a green tent in the garden to serve as a makeshift chapel. He was brought into the bedroom and administered the last rites to Alexei.
So they thought it was over.
The boy was given to God, but Alexandra was not ready to let him go.
Which brings us to the telegram that changed the course of the 20th century. The desperation in that room reaches its absolute peak. In the dramatization, Alexandra begs Nicholas to send for Grigory Rasputin, the Siberian peasant mystic who had occasionally been able to calm the boy in the past.
Right, Rasputin is a well-known figure, but his role here is crucial.
Now, at this time, in 1912, Rasputin wasn't wandering the halls of the palace like he does in the movies. He had actually been exiled. He was completely out of favor and living back in his home village of Pokrovskoe, which is thousands of miles away in Siberia.
They couldn't just walk him into the room.
Exactly. They had to send him a desperate, frantic telegram.
And the transmission of that telegram and the response it generated is one of the most heavily scrutinized moments in all of Russian history.
Because of what happened next.
Yeah. Rasputin receives the message, and his reply arrives back at Spała. The exact wording recorded in the historical archives is chilling in its brevity and its absolute authority.
What did it say?
He wrote, "God has seen your tears and heard your prayers. Do not grieve. The illness will not be dangerous. Do not let the doctors bother him too much."
And then, the inexplicable happens. Almost immediately after that telegram is received and read by Alexandra, the bleeding stops. The fever breaks. The boy actually begins to recover.
It's a turning point.
Okay, I need you to explain this to me, because on paper, it sounds like pure magic. How does a telegram from a peasant in Siberia stop an internal hemorrhage in a Polish forest?
This is where medical historians have stepped in to offer a fascinating, highly plausible scientific hypothesis. We have to look at the pharmacology of 1912.
Okay, lay it on me.
At the time, aspirin salicylic acid was a relatively new, heavily promoted wonder drug. It had been synthesized by Bayer just over a decade earlier. Doctors around the world were aggressively prescribing it for pain management and fever reduction.
Which Alexei definitely had.
Right. It is highly, highly likely that Alexei's elite doctors, desperate to manage his excruciating joint pain and high temperatures, were dosing him heavily with aspirin.
Which makes total sense if you have a child screaming in pain. You give him the newest, best painkiller.
Exactly. Except today we understand the full mechanism of aspirin. Aspirin inhibits the production of prostaglandins and thromboxanes.
Meaning what, exactly?
In simple terms, it acts as a potent antiplatelet agent. It actively prevents blood cells from clumping together. It is an anticoagulant.
Oh my God. So the doctors, in their desperate attempt to help him, were actively thinning his blood. They were fueling the hemorrhage.
That is the leading medical theory. By giving him aspirin, they were preventing his body from forming even the weakest of clots.
Wow.
When Rasputin telegraphed his specific instruction, "Do not let the doctors bother him too much," he likely prompted Alexandra to banish the doctors from the room, or at the very least, stop their active treatments. That would mean stopping the aspirin.
And once the aspirin leaves his system...
Once the anticoagulant is removed, Alexei's own body, combined with the fact that the hematoma had likely reached a point of maximum tissue pressure where the bleeding was mechanically tamponated, was finally able to stabilize.
The pressure essentially plugged the leak.
Yes. The blood began to reabsorb naturally. The crisis passed.
That is absolutely mind-blowing. The mystic's random anti-establishment advice actually aligned perfectly with what a modern hematologist would tell you to do. Stop the anticoagulants immediately.
It's a crazy coincidence.
But of course, to Alexandra sitting in that dark bedroom, the pharmacology of salicylic acid doesn't matter at all. She doesn't know what an antiplatelet agent is.
To her, it's a literal miracle.
Exactly. All she knows, all she will ever know, is that the most educated, elite doctors in Russia told her that her son was going to die. A peasant mystic, thousands of miles away, told her he would live. And the mystic was right.
And this is the monumental shift. This is the tectonic plate moving beneath the Russian Empire. From this exact point in October 1912 forward, Alexandra's faith in Grigory Rasputin is no longer just an interest in alternative healing.
It becomes dangerous.
It becomes absolute, unshakable religious dogma. He is no longer just a holy man. He is the literal savior of the Romanov dynasty. In her mind, anyone who speaks against Rasputin is an enemy of the Tsar, an enemy of God, and a direct threat to the survival of her son.
Look at it from her perspective. She is psychologically held hostage. If you genuinely believe this man holds a supernatural key to your child's life, you will do whatever he says.
You'd give him anything.
If he holds the key to the Tsarevich, he holds the key to the entire Russian Empire. She basically hands him the moral authority of the crown.
Which sets the stage for the catastrophic downfall of the regime. But before Rasputin can dismantle the government, the Romanovs first have to get out of Spała. They have to cover up the fact that this near-death experience ever happened.
And the logistics of this cover-up particularly the train ride home to St. Petersburg, are just bizarre. Alexei survives the crisis, but he is left severely crippled. Because of the bleeding in the iliopsoas muscle, his leg is permanently drawn up to his chest. He cannot walk.
He's basically immobile.
But the family has to return to their primary residence, the Alexander Palace at Tsarskoye Selo, and they have to prove to the public that everything is perfectly fine. Spiritovich recounts how they pulled this off, and it involves a military-level operation on the railway.
To prevent any sudden jolts that might tear the fragile hematoma open again, General Hesketh, the director of the Vistula Railroad, issued an unprecedented order.
What did he do?
He commanded the engineers of the Imperial train not to use the brakes for the entire journey across the country.
Think about the physics of that. Driving a massive steam-powered locomotive across the Russian landscape, regulating speed entirely through steam pressure and coasting, just to ensure there isn't a single mechanical jolt.
It's an incredible feat of engineering, really.
It shows the extreme, almost terrifying lengths the state apparatus would go to protect this one fragile boy.
And the play, Holiday in Spała, dramatizes the terrifying lengths Alexandra herself would go to. There is a deeply uncomfortable scene where she forces a recovering, still crippled Alexei to stand up on his own 2 feet and pose for a photograph with Princess Radziwill.
While he's still in agony.
Yes. The sole purpose of this photograph is public relations, to prove to the Polish nobility and the Russian public that the rumors of the Tsarevich being an invalid are false. She is forcing a boy who is just on his deathbed, whose leg is contracted in pain, to stand upright for the cameras.
It reveals a family retreating so deeply into an echo chamber that they are willing to torture their own son just to maintain the illusion. And that echo chamber completely solidifies when they finally get back home.
They bring in a new doctor, right?
Yeah, they bring in Dr. Ryton, a highly respected orthopedic specialist. Ryton takes one look at Alexei's twisted leg and tells Alexandra the brutal, unvarnished truth. The boy needs to wear a heavy, painful iron corrective brace and undergo rigorous physical therapy, or he will be lame for the rest of his life. He speaks to the Empress with total medical frankness.
And how do the autocrats of Russia react to a doctor telling them the truth?
Alexandra despises his frankness. She is insulted that he would speak so bluntly about the heir. And Nicholas, enabling her delusion, dismisses Dr. Ryton from the court entirely. They literally fire the man for giving them an accurate medical diagnosis.
It is the ultimate symptom of a dying regime. They systematically purge the doctors, the advisors, and eventually the government ministers who tell them the brutal truth. Simultaneously, they elevate a mystic who tells them exactly what they want to hear.
And people could see this happening, right?
Oh, yeah. In Ryton's play, the Dowager Empress sees this dynamic taking root, and she is terrified. She explicitly warns Nicholas that his wife is no longer acting just as a protective mother. She is acting as the true autocrat of Russia.
She sees the writing on the wall.
The Dowager Empress delivers a prophetic line in the play. That means Rasputin's reign has started. Revolution is inevitable.
You can clearly see how this localized family trauma sparks that revolution. Because Alexandra is convinced Rasputin is a conduit to God, his influence just metastasizes. He starts advising on the appointment of government ministers.
He gets involved in everything.
He starts weighing in on military policy, especially a few years later during World War I, when Nicholas unwisely leaves the capital to take personal command of the army at the front.
Leaving Alexandra and Rasputin in charge.
Exactly. The Russian nobility despises Rasputin's influence so intensely that a group of aristocrats, led by Prince Felix Yusupov, eventually murders him in 1916. But by then, the damage is terminal.
It's too late.
The public trusts neither the Tsar nor the Tsarina. The moral authority of the 300-year Romanov dynasty has simply evaporated.
The profound tragedy here is that if we are to truly understand history, we must look at the Romanovs not simply as historical caricatures.
Yeah.
You know, the bumbling, weak Tsar and the hysterical, evil empress.
Yeah, they were real people.
We have to view them as tragically flawed, desperately frightened human beings. They were a father completely out of his depth, trying to run a massive, complex empire in a rapidly modernizing world, and a terrified mother whose desperate, all-consuming love for her suffering son blinded her to the fact that her world was crumbling around her.
It's the ultimate historical example of good intentions paving the road to hell. They loved their son so much and were so desperate to protect him that they broke their empire to save him.
And that irony is just brutal.
It is, and as a listener, you have to remind yourself of the staggering, cruel irony of all this. Alexei endured years of this horrific medical torture. He survived the unimaginable agony of Spała. He fought through a genetic disease that by all rights should have killed him in infancy.
He fought so hard.
He survived all of that, only to be murdered by his father's executioner, Yakov Yurovsky, in a squalid basement in Yekaterinburg just 6 years later.
It is a dark and profound irony. He didn't die because his blood was too fragile to clot. He died because the political system his illness helped to fracture finally collapsed in on him.
Which brings us right back to where we started. I want you to return to October 1912. Picture that quiet hunting retreat in the dark Polish woods. A desperately ill little boy, his leg drawn to his chest, bleeding in the dark. A frightened mother clutching a mysterious telegram from a Siberian peasant, believing she has just witnessed a miracle. Those weren't just the shadows of the forest creeping into the villa. They were the first, faint shadows of the end of Imperial Russia.
It is an incredible story, and Royce Ryton's dramatization captures the emotional truth of that claustrophobic nightmare brilliantly.
It really does. And if you want to experience the incredible drama of the source material for yourself, I highly invite you to listen to the complete BBC radio broadcast of Royce Ryton's Holiday in Spała on the Common Room from Chesterton Radio. It is a phenomenal piece of audio theater that brings this history to vivid, terrifying life.
And as we close this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We so often think of history as being shaped by massive, sweeping macro forces, shifting tectonic plates of economics, grand treaties, or the movements of massive armies.
The big stuff.
Right. But ask yourself this. If an 8-year-old boy hadn't decided to jump into a porcelain bathtub to pretend he was a sailor, would the Russian Revolution have happened exactly the way it did?
Wow. From a bathtub in Poland to the fall of an empire. Thanks for diving deep with us today.